Well, hello everyone. Welcome to TruthScript Tuesday. I'm your host, David Harris, and we're going to look at two articles tonight from this early January edition of the TruthScript Tuesday podcast. These two articles really get to the core of the purpose of TruthScript. And speaking of core purpose, just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has been involved in this ministry from its inception in April of last year up till now. I've really been blown away by just all the people who have donated their time and their talent, their resources, and their finances to seeing this project get off the ground. It's been really amazing to see how God has blessed it. Our prayer is that 2024 would go even farther and that this would be an impactful year for TruthScript as we try to shine a light in our increasingly dark culture and equip Christians with answers and ways to think through tough questions that are staring them down right now, as well as just provide encouragement just in general. So hopefully, if you're listening to this, I'm going to assume that this ministry has benefited you. Thank you for nothing else. Thank you for listening. Share these articles if they impact you. Share them around. There is a way that might be easier to do if you take a look at your favorite streaming service. Could be Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The TruthScript, right now it's under TruthScript Live. That may change, but that's, if you want to find it, that's what's to search for on the podcast platforms. So you can actually find the articles now in audio format. Justin Puckett, who's written for us a few times, he has volunteered graciously his time and resources to record these for us, and he has a great, robust voice, and we really, really appreciate that. And this is kind of makes it easier to share around. And then, I commute quite a bit, so I'm in the car like an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes, and this is a really convenient, easy way to listen to these. You can also go to YouTube, and they're also on YouTube. So one of the ways that this is really beneficial is a lot of people don't read today. So sometimes you can have conversations with people that, there's almost like a divide between people who read and people who don't. A lot of people don't read. A lot of people spend, a majority of their time on their phone. An audio version of an article is a great way to sort of bypass that, if they don't really read. So hopefully just to make things easier, make things more streamlined, to share those resources with others. So we're going to look at two articles from the past week and a half. Some of the first articles of January. The first one is called what? Well, you know what? Before I actually get into that, I want to read for you. The beginning of an article from Christianity Today. This article is from August 14, 2023. It's called "Should I Offer My Pronouns?" It says, gendered language is increasingly controversial in public life. Christians are grappling with how to engage. Just going to read through we can only read through the beginning because I don't subscribe. There's a paywall. But just looking at the beginning, Shua Wilmot and Reagan Zelaya worked in residence life at Houghton University, a Christian school in upstate New York. Even though it conflicted with university policy, they listed their pronouns in their email signatures to help students identify their genders, they said, given their atypical names. When the university requested they remove their pronouns earlier this year, Wilmot and Zelaya refused. They were fired. My name is Shua. It's an unusual name, and it ends with a vowel, A, that is traditionally feminine in many languages, Wilmot, whose full first name is Joshua, said in a YouTube interview. If you get an email from me and you don't know who I am, you might not know how to gender me. Zelaya added in the same interview that she felt removing her pronouns from her email signature would imply that the students who felt safe by me doing that, the students that felt seen by me doing that, weren't worth taking this risk and this stance. All right, so that's all we are able to view of that article. You can kind of probably take a guess where that article is going, but we had a sort of a different approach to the subject of pronouns from Andrew Ollis. So Andrew Ollis is a gentleman who's done quite a bit of ministry work. Right now he is involved with a church plant in North Dakota. Brave gentleman. And he wrote this piece called "What Are You Willing to Sacrifice?" Let's just look at the first couple of sentences here and kind of juxtapose it a little bit to the Christianity today, or what is obvious was going to be the take of that article. A fundamental point of consideration when living in post-Christian society is whether complicity in a lie, unloving confirmation, and even encouragement by approval of a confused, lost person in his or her delusion is warranted simply to keep your job and a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. So you'll notice here that Andrew is flipping the script from what we just read. You have two people who are fired for having their pronouns in. So, Christianity today has sought them out and found them. And look, they were sort of persecuted for doing this thing. The reality of the situation is if you're going to get fired, it's probably going to be because you won't conform to it. Everybody knows that. And the question for a Christian is really, are you going to go along with that? Is it warranted to, he says, is this warranted simply to keep your job in a comfortable middle-class lifestyle? What's culturally demanded is referring to a man as a woman using preferred pronouns. But this is denying reality and so denying God as creator who made them male and female. So are you willing to call evil good and good evil? And he he goes on to talk about some historical examples, the martyrs throughout history who would not be complicit with lies. That, for example, that Caesar is Lord, and would only say that Christ is Lord, and would face death for that. He goes into John Bunyan and a few other examples, but the overall point can be applied even more broadly than to just the issue of personal pronouns. So just, I guess, as an aside with this particular issue. So I'm in education. I've been in education for about a decade. I worked in New York. I live and work in Tennessee now. And in New York, this was something that I was barely able to avoid. I was trying so hard. I didn't want to be in the situation where, a kid is going to walk into a class that I'm in. And we're calling him Steve now. And you're like, that is not Steve. That is Eve. And I know I have friends who work in the same districts that I went to school in, who are already having that issue. Like, kids are coming into their class. And, so they'll try to find ways to avoid it. If they're Christians, most people just go along with it. But I know for myself, that was something that I sort of knew, okay, and it actually is one of the reasons why I relocated from doing the job where I was doing it. That was something that I knew, if I'm asked to cross this line, then I'm not really serious about honoring the Lord first and foremostly, because this is not living towards the people that I'm trying to be a light to, but it's also dishonorable to God. Complicity in a lie is not honoring to God, pretending that up is down and down is up. And it's hard because we live in a society that, is insane, that is sort of the pretext for a lot of the ways of thinking and doing and being within our society. And there's probably gray areas that one Christian could say maybe could be more long suffering. I think we saw some of that over the COVID saga, where one Christian, their conscience won't allow for them to be complicit in one thing that another, their conscience doesn't bother them as much. And there was a lot of debate and discussion around those things. Something like gender pronouns, if there is discussion, then you're outside of a biblical framework, because this is clear reality. This is the basic, scriptural truths about the world that we live in and about humanity and the way that God has created them. And there are few things as dastardly as flipping that script. And where we've gotten to in our society now is just abusing children, especially through these mutilating surgeries and everything that goes along with it. But let's go back to the article a little farther down. So he says a little later on, so betraying, denying Christ due to cowardice is here to align oneself with the enemies of God and also with their dreadful eternal fate. They are the ones who, when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately fall away. They have denied the faith under the pressure of persecution, and by saving their lives in this world, end up finally losing it. So like any other sin, when this sin is revealed in the leadership of the church, it should be dealt with. So what he goes into is, if you are trying to find somebody for a position in your church, so this is going to be increasingly relevant as older pastors retire, for example, you should know where they stand on this issue. It should be his point is this should be something that is standard on any prospective employment questionnaire, any cross-examination. If you're going to hire somebody or even just have them come on as an elder, you need to know where they're going to stand on this issue. If there's any, if it's nuanced and there's different, well, then you kind of know, okay, all right, we can have you go stack chairs, but maybe a leadership position is not where you need to be. And that's not always, some people are going to, different Christians are at different stages in their walk, and some are leaders and some are followers, and that's okay. But those who are not prepared to lead should not be leading. That's the overall point. He says a little further on, he says, our forerunners in the faith are instructive in this area. John Bunyan. Oh, here's John Bunyan. John Bunyan, the author of Pilgrim's Progress, spent 12 years in jail with a blind daughter, Mary, whom he loved and was unable to support, which broke his heart. All he had to do to be released was say that he wouldn't preach the gospel as an unauthorized, unlicensed preacher. He refused and stood steadfast despite being in jail and not being able to support his family. So one of the things that's a really difficult thing to deal with that a lot of us never really thought we would have to think through. But, as a man, I have a family, and the thing I care about most in life is providing for and taking care of my family, making sure that they have everything that they need and are taken care of. And I can't imagine the stress of not being able to presently be present and making sure that your family is taken care of. There would be, I can't think of really too many things that would be worse than being forcibly separated from my family. But yet we have seen Christians throughout history who, because they would not comply with the state religion, were forced away from their family. We're not able to provide in a tangible way. We do know that God provides for his people. So we can have faith in that promise, but we also know that persecution happens and that we have to be ready for it. So take a look at Andrew's article. Again, you can go on a streaming platform, or you can go on YouTube if you want to listen to it, or you can read it on the TruthScript website. We're going to look now at Jonah Hewer. He is a gentleman from Minnesota, and he wrote an article called Lessons Learned While Praying for God's Judgment. And let's just take a look at the beginning here. This is a great article. He says, as someone who has wrestled with a quick temper since childhood, the idea of wrath has puzzled me for a long time. In particular, understanding when anger is truly righteous and what to do with that kind of anger. This is key right here. What do you do with anger? For years, this has confounded me. Now, obviously, there's anger that's righteous and there's anger that's unrighteous, right? Be angry and do not sin. So he's going to be referring here specifically to anger that is righteous, because it is a righteous thing to desire to see injustice punished, to see wrongful doing and grievous evil, as he's going to address, to see that being judged by God. So let's read on. He said, last year I determined to gain a better understanding of wrath and anger. To do so, instead of trying to suppress my feelings of anger whenever they arose, I resolved to meditate on God's holy wrath whenever I began to feel a rise in my temper. This practice taught me a couple of very valuable lessons that I hope will be useful to others. So the context here is a story from last spring illustrates the lessons I've learned particularly well. So this is Minnesota. He's in Minnesota. The government in my home state of Minnesota went on a legislative spree to enshrine all manner of wickedness into our state laws. The laws passed included legalizing abortion up until birth, designating Minnesota as a so-called trans refuge state, and a number of other terribly wicked things. And he says here, at the same time as the legislative session, I was working on a construction project for the state capitol in St. Paul. Every day for months, I walked past buildings where men and women were deciding which fresh sins to institutionalize. Week after week, that reality grated against my soul until one day, when I was walking past the capitol after my shift, anger swelled in my heart and stopped me in my tracks. I turned where I stood, faced the capitol, and prayed. Here's what he prayed for. I prayed for God to judge my wicked rulers. I prayed for God to punish the people flouting righteousness and justice, embracing evil instead. I named my governor and several legislators specifically. I poured out my heartbreak and grief for my beautiful, beloved home state, the only earthly home I've ever known. I thank God for his promise that every sin would one day be punished, absolutely, and that everyone who did not confess Jesus Christ as Lord would one day be cast into a lake of fire. A few things happened over the course of this prayer. So I can really identify with this being from New York. Minnesota, I guess first Minnesota is an amazing state. I would love to live in Minnesota, or at least I would have. I thought of that part of the country as being one of the more boring parts of the country, and I had been there when I was really young, but 2 years ago, my wife and I drove through the top of Minnesota on our way to Montana, and I fell in love with that state. It is one of the most beautiful places. I like the north. I like the cold, so I don't mind snow or ice or anything like that. And it's just so beautiful. The lakes everywhere and the pine forest, and and we were driving through this one town, and there was this big like Paul Bunyan statue or monument. I guess it wouldn't be a monument, like a huge Paul Bunyan statue, sort of at this town square. And there's this long, sort of classic looking main street, and at the head of it is this park, and with this huge Paul Bunyan. And it looked like the entire town was out having some kind of a shindig, some kind of a summer get-together festival or something. There's vendors everywhere, and it just seems so wholesome. And it's also the Midwest, so everything's very clean. And it was just like the most idyllic small town I've ever seen in my life. And so around the same time, or a little bit before, when Minneapolis was burning to the ground, and then like Jonah here talking about the 2023 legislative session, it's mind-boggling that those are the same. That's technically the same jurisdiction. That's the same state. It's incredible. But where I'm from is very similar. I'm from a more rural part of New York, but the entire state is run by very, very wicked people who really love their sin and they love evil. So I very much identified, and especially like over the COVID saga, the things that I witnessed, especially being in education, that my wife witnessed being in healthcare. This resonated very, very much so. So what did he experience? He said, he's standing there, he's praying for God's judgment. He's praying for God's wrath. He said, first I was humbled. Why is he humbled? Well, as I prayed, images came to mind of God's wrath demonstrated in the pages of Scripture. Fire and brimstone, boils, darkness, the Nile turned to blood, and more. But he said, in that moment of pause, I was reminded starkly of my own sins. So he realized, okay, I'm thinking about wrath, but I'm also thinking about how I deserve that. I deserve that same wrath, but God had mercy on me. He said, none of this meant that I lacked the right to pray for God's judgment. Even so, this sharp reminder to fear God helped me keep from arrogance in my prayer. And I was reminded of my own unworthiness of the gift of mercy I've so happily received. So one thing I think is notable is that he's not saying that it's his desire for God's judgment on this evil, that was wrong. It's just that he's realizing that but for the grace of God, would he be in that number as well? So the second effect of my prayer was a great encouragement in my heart. It grieves the believing heart to live in a fallen world. My heart was certainly grieving on that day in particular. So many opportunities for both deep discouragement and helpless anger are presented to believers. Now, this is this is a really good line right here. Helpless anger. So if you're angry at the current political situation, which I'm sure would be more commonplace now than probably any time in recent history. What do you do with that anger? Well, if you don't have a relationship with Christ, if you don't have God, then there's really nowhere to take that anger. You're just upset, and it's not a surprise why suicide rates are the highest they've been in a long time. That drug overdoses. What do you do if you're angry? If it grieves you to see injustice, but there's nothing that can be done because you don't have eternal perspective. So that's what Jonah's bringing into the forefront, and that is one of the reasons why we should not despair, because our anger does not need to be helpless, because we're not helpless, because we serve a God that is not helpless. He's working things together for the will of those who are called according to His purpose, as we know from Romans 8. So he says, even so, anger and discouragement may be dispelled by the simple reminder that vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Did my heart break to see evil being done in my state? Did I yearn for God's justice? Well, this is another good line. Well, the divine court dates are set. The divine court dates are set. That's, put it on a bumper sticker. Just stick it on the back of your car. A lot of people will more and more will probably get what that means. It's a sort of a chilling yet almost comforting thought. And then finally says, I was delighted by God's mercy. God's mercy seems all the sweeter after meditating on His wrath. If He's guilty and you're guilty and I'm guilty, then if God had condemned me to eternal damnation rather than saving me from my sin, He would have been no less good or just, and yet He showed me mercy. So he says here at the end, I wanted and still want the sins of the 2023 legislative session in Minnesota to be punished. But maybe by God's grace, their punishment can be found at the cross rather than in the pit. So there's a number of takeaways from this piece. But one that you can apply directly to your life now, and I definitely have been since reading this, is when I'm filled up with any combination of anger or despondency because of what I see on a daily basis. And it's been said before, we're not really meant to experience the amount of information that is constantly flying us. We see every problem and every horrible thing coming in from every corner of the world. If we had seen that throughout history, then we probably we'd feel the same way all the time. But our brains aren't really, especially those of us who have not grown up we're not really digital natives. We grew up before this stuff existed. These technologies, it's overwhelming, and it's very easy to get, depressed, despondent. And I think if we're honest, a lot of us fight that. So, it might sound cliche, but we should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. But that doesn't mean that we just need to say, well, dear Lord, please make everything right. We are allowed to pray specifically for God's justice and judgment. And that is not a bad thing. God's justice is a good thing. And when we do that, then we'll find, like in Jonah's case, we'll get an eternal perspective on the situation that we're currently in. So when you feel angry, when you feel upset towards the evil that you see around you, take that to the Lord in prayer. Thank Him for His mercy on you, and you can pray that it would be extended towards others. And it's okay to ask for Him also to judge evil as well. So, two really good articles for this TruthScript Tuesday. Again, I just remind you, if you're interested in writing for TruthScript, you can always submit something. You go here to, I'll pull it back up to the TruthScript website. You go to the bottom of our homepage, and there's a little button here that says Publish. There's a style guide, and then there is also, if you haven't clicked on that style guide, we do go into specific things and ideas for you to write about. But current things that are going on are always good, And there's plenty of timeless topics as well that could be addressed. Thanks for tuning in. God bless, and we will, God willing, see you next week.